guys, welcome back to chapter 20 of Gangster Granny by David Walliams. I'm interested to see what happens. I can't wait to see if they get the jewels. So let's get started with chapter 20. Boom, boom, boom. Ben couldn't believe what Granny had just said. There was no way he would risk stealing the crown jewels, only to put them back the very next night. But they are worth millions, billions even, he complained. I know. So we'd definitely get caught if we tried to sell them, replied Granny. But, no buts, boy. We put them back the next night. Do you know how I evaded prison all these years? I never sold a thing. I just did it for the buzz. But you kept them, though, said Ben. Even if you didn't sell them, you've got all those jewels in your biscuit tin. Granny blinked. Yes, well, I was young and foolish then, she said. I have learned since that it is wrong to steal, and you need to understand that too. She gave him a fierce look. Ben squirmed. I do, of course I do. It's a brilliant plan you put together, Ben. Honestly, it is. But those jewels don't belong to us, do they? No, said Ben. No, they don't. He felt a tiny bit ashamed. Now he had been so horrified at the idea of giving back the jewels. And don't forget that every policeman in the country, maybe even the world, will be looking for the crown jewels. They'll have all of Scotland Yard after us. If we're found with them, we'd be thrown in prison for the rest of our lives. That might not be so long for me, but for you, it could be 70 or 80 years. You're right, said Ben. And the Queen seems like such a nice old lady, dear. We're around the same age, actually. I would hate to upset her. Me too, murmured Ben. He had seen the Queen on the news loads of times, and she seemed like a nice old lady, smiling and waving at everybody from the back of her giant pram. Let's just do it for the thrill. Agreed? Agreed, said Ben. When can we do it? It will have to be a Friday night when Mom and Dad take me to stay at yours. Did the doctor say when you'll be out of the hospital? Oh, yes, he did. He said I could leave any time. Fantastic. But we need to do it very soon. How about next Friday? Isn't that too soon? Not at all. Your plan seems very well thought out, Ben. Thank you, said Ben, beaming. It was the first time ever that he had felt like he had made a grown-up proud of him. When I get out of here, I'll get on to pinching the equipment we need. Now run along, Ben, and I will see you next Friday night at the usual time. Ben pulled back the curtain. Mr. Parker, Granny's nosy neighbor, was standing right there. Startled, Ben took a couple of steps back towards the bed and quickly shoved, plumbing weakly up the back of his jumper. What are you doing here? Asked Ben. Hoping to see me take a bed bath? No doubt, said Granny. Ben chuckled. Mr. Parker scrambled for words.
No, I.
Matrone! Matrone! Hollered Granny.
Wait,
said Mr. Parker, panicking.
I'm sure I heard one of you talking about the crown jewels.
It was too late. The matrone, who was an unusually tall lady with very big feet, clomped down the ward at speed. Yes, asked the matrone. Is something the matter? This man was spying at me through the curtains, said Granny. Were you? Demanded Matrone, eyeballing Mr. Parker.
Well, I heard that they were,
whined Mr. Parker. Last week he spied on my granny doing her naked yoga, offered Ben. Matrone's face turned puce with horror. Get out of my ward at once, you filthy little swine, she screamed. Humiliated, Mr. Parker backed away from the terrifying Matrone and scuttled out of the ward. He paused at the swing doors and yelled back to Granny and Ben.
You haven't seen the last of me,
before rushing out. Please let me know if that man comes back, said Matrone, her face returning to a more normal shade. I will, replied Granny before Matrone returned to her duties. He could have heard everything, hissed Ben. Maybe, replied Granny, but I think Matrone scared him off for good. I hope so. Ben was very worried about this unfortunate development. Do you still want to go through with it? asked the old lady. Ben had the feeling you have when you are on a roller coaster and it's slowly making its way up the track. You want to get off and you want to stay on. Dread and delight all rolled into one. Yes, he said. Hurrah, said Granny, giving Ben a big smile. Ben turned to leave and then turned around. I love you, Granny, he said. And I love you too, little Benny, said Granny with a wink. Ben winced. He had a gangster granny now, and that was great, but he was going to have to teach her to just call him Ben. Ben ran along the corridors, his heart beating incredibly fast. Boom, boom, boom. He was electrified with excitement. This 11-year-old boy, who had never done anything notable in his life, except once been sick on a friend's head on the big wheel at the local fun fair, was going to take part in the most daring robbery the world had ever known. He ran outside the hospital and began fumbling with the keys to unlock his bike from the railing. Then, looking up, he saw something unbelievable. It was his granny. That in itself was not unusual, but this was. Granny was abseiling down the side of the hospital. She had tied a number of bed sheets together and was lowering herself at speed down the side of the building. Ben couldn't believe his eyes. He knew his granny was a proper gangster, but this was off the scale. Granny, what on earth are you doing? Shouted Ben across the car park. The lift wasn't working, dear, she said. See you next Friday. Don't be late, she shouted as she reached the ground, leaped on her mobility scooter, and roared off. Well, whirred off home. Never had a week pass so slowly. Ben spent all week waiting for Friday to come. Every minute, every hour, every day seemed like an eternity. It was strange having to pretend he was just an ordinary boy, when really he was one of the greatest criminal masterminds of all time. Finally, Friday evening came. There was a knock on Ben's bedroom door. Rat-tat-tat. Well, are you ready, son? Asked Dad. Yeah, said Ben, trying to act as innocent as possible, which was actually quite hard when you are feeling extremely guilty. You don't need to pick me up too early in the morning tomorrow. Granny and I normally play Scrabble until quite late. You won't be playing Scrabble, son, said Dad. No? No, son. You won't be going to Granny's tonight at all. Oh, no, said Ben. Is she back in the hospital? No, she's not. Ben sighed with relief, then felt a prickle of anxiety. So why am I not going to her house? The plan was in place, and there was no time to lose. Because, said Dad, tonight is the under-12 dancing competition championship. At last, it's your big moment to shine. And will Ben shine? That will be determined possibly on the next chapter of Gangster Granny by David Walliams. See you next time, guys. Make sure you do those questions with complete sentences. See you next time.